In the first 3 months of 2026, Canada's population fell by more than 55,000 people. More people packed up and left than moved in, and Statistics Canada says that is the fastest exodus this country has recorded in 74 years. You have probably seen the videos. Sell the house in Ontario or British Columbia, move to Portugal or Panama, pay almost no income tax, and live on $2 beers while your CPP and OAS still show up every month. If you are between 55 and 65, that pitch is built for you. It sounds like the escape hatch from years of rising property tax bills and grocery prices. Here is the part those videos leave out. A 63-year-old with a common health issue like high blood pressure can pay between $10,000 and $28,000 a year for private health insurance once Canadian coverage disappears. That single number can erase most of the tax savings you thought you were getting, and it usually shows up after the moving boxes are already unpacked. We are going to call this the healthcare arbitrage trap. You save on tax in a low-tax country, then hand a big piece of it straight back to an insurance company because you are no longer covered by a public system. By the time you are 70, the cheap lifestyle can end up costing more than staying in a high-tax province ever did. Today, I am walking through the hidden math behind the expat dream for people who are actually close to retirement, including the CRA rule that can trigger a large tax bill the moment you cross the border. If you want the numbers instead of the lifestyle hype, stay with me and think about subscribing to the Playbook. We look at what actually happens to your retirement income, not what looks good in a highlight reel. Most of the immigration guides talk about future tax savings. They almost never mention what happens on your way out the door, and that is where the real damage starts. The CRA has a rule called deemed disposition. The day you officially leave Canada, the government treats your investments as if you sold every one of them at fair market value, even if you never touched them. For a couple holding a $600,000 RRSP and a $200,000 non-registered portfolio, that can turn into an immediate six-figure tax bill on the non-registered side alone. Your RRSP works a little differently. It is not hit with that immediate exit tax, but once you become a non-resident, every withdrawal gets taxed at a flat 25%, taken off the top by the payer before the money ever reaches you. Picture two versions of the same retiree. One stays a Canadian resident and pulls $40,000 a year from a RRIF, paying tax at their normal marginal rate. The other becomes a non-resident and pulls the same $40,000 but 25%, or $10,000 gets withheld automatically before a cent lands in a foreign bank account. If that retiree's real tax bracket at home was only 15%, moving away just cost an extra $4,000 a year on the exact same withdrawal every single year. That extra $4,000 is roughly the size of a property tax bill in many parts of the country, except this one disappears quietly instead of arriving as a single dramatic notice. I have watched people find this out after the fact, usually from an accountant, months after the moving truck already left. Nobody is trying to punish you for going. You are settling up on years of tax deferral the government gave you while you lived and contributed here. Think of it less as a penalty and more as a bill that was always coming, just later than you expected. Here is the trade-off nobody puts in the brochure. The tax break from leaving is visible and immediate. The cost of losing tax-sheltered growth inside a RRSP or TFSA is invisible, and it compounds quietly for the next 20 years. Statistics Canada has already confirmed immigration numbers at levels not seen since the years right after the Second World War, and the Financial Consumer Agency of Canada has flagged that many people never run the numbers on what that lost sheltering is actually worth over time. The exit tax and the withholding tax are real costs, but they are a one-time toll and a known percentage. The next cost is the one that quietly grows every year you are gone, and it stays free for as long as you remain a resident here. Here is a framework worth remembering. Call it the net benefit age curve. In your 50s, a low-tax country usually wins on the numbers. In your 70s, the math quietly flips, and Canada's public system often wins instead. The reason is healthcare, and the reason it flips is age. Insurers do not price coverage randomly. They underwrite each policy against your actual age and your actual medical history, the same way a car insurance renewal climbs the year after you file a claim. A 45-year-old backpacker gets a cheap quote because the insurer is betting they will barely use it. A 63-year-old already taking blood pressure medication is a completely different bet, and the premium reflects that risk every year going forward, not just the first one. For a 63-year-old couple moving to Portugal, comprehensive private coverage with real hospital access can run anywhere from $10,000 to $28,000 a year, and that is before a single claim gets filed. To put that number in perspective, it is more than many homeowners pay in property tax and a hydro bill combined for an entire year, and it arrives whether or not anyone in the household ever sets foot in a hospital. CARP has pointed out for years that travel and expat health coverage is one of the most underestimated costs in a cross-border retirement plan, mainly because the sticker shock does not show up until after the move, when reversing course is expensive and disruptive. Provincial health coverage back home does not travel with you either. Most provinces cancel it once you have been away for roughly 6 months to a year. So the public safety net you grew up trusting disappears at almost the same moment the private premiums start. Run the simple version of the math. Say that same couple saves $10,000 a year in provincial income tax by leaving a high-tax province. If their new health premiums land at $11,000 a year, the tax haven they moved for just handed them a $1,000 pay cut, not a windfall. And that gap widens as they age into their late 60s and 70s, which is exactly when they are most likely to actually need the coverage. I used to think the move to Mexico crowd had it completely figured out. I even looked at listings near Lake Chapala myself at one point, half convinced it was the answer. Then I sat with a client whose husband had a minor heart scare in Cabo, and the bill was nothing like the polite version people post about online. Their expat policy had a stability clause buried in the fine print, and it left them owing $50,000 out of pocket for a problem that would have cost nothing back home under a provincial health card. That is the detail nobody mentions in the retirement blog post. Before signing anything, get an actual binding quote from an international insurer, one that has your specific conditions on file, not a friendly estimate passed around a Facebook group. A quote built around your real health history is the only number in this whole decision that actually means something. If the healthcare gap alone does not change your math, the pension system might finish the job. Do you know what happens to your OAS the moment you are away from Canada for more than 184 days in a single year? Your CPP is not really up for debate here. You paid into it directly out of every paycheck, so it stays yours no matter which country you retire in. OAS and GIS are a different story because they are based on how long you actually lived in Canada, not how long you worked. The rule most people miss is specific. If you have less than 20 years of residency in Canada after turning 18, OAS payments generally stop about 6 months after you become a non-resident. Cross that 20-year threshold, and OAS can follow you almost anywhere in the world for as long as you live. GIS follows a similar residency logic, and it typically stops once you have been out of the country for an extended stretch, since it was built as a top-up for low-income seniors actually living here. If GIS is part of your monthly number, moving abroad does not shrink that check. It erases it. There is a currency risk sitting underneath all of this too. During the 2008 financial crisis, the Canadian dollar dropped sharply against the US dollar, falling below 80 cents US by March of 2009. Retirees who had already moved abroad and were converting Canadian pension income into US dollars, or a currency pegged to it, took what amounted to an overnight pay cut of more than 20%, with no warning and no way to opt out. That kind of swing is the same order of magnitude as a car insurance renewal jumping by hundreds of dollars in a single year, except this one hits every dollar of income at once. Not just one bill. That is the mechanism worth understanding. CPP and OAS get paid out in Canadian dollars. If you are living somewhere that prices groceries, rent, and healthcare in US dollars, or in a currency tied to it like the UAE dirham, your monthly income is riding on the exchange rate every month, whether you think about it or not. A strong loonie makes the arithmetic look great. A weak one quietly shrinks your grocery budget without a single policy ever changing. If you are counting on the average CPP payment of around $925 a month plus OAS, just to cover day-to-day living, moving to a country with a stronger, more stable currency is not just a lifestyle choice anymore. It is an actuarial bet, and it is one you are placing with money you cannot easily replace at 68 or 70. There is a way to get most of the upside here without taking on all of that risk, but it only works if you actually test the plan first, and most people skip that step entirely. Let's run one full scenario the way it actually plays out for someone who did not stress test the plan. A 67-year-old retiree in Panama develops a chronic condition that needs an ongoing specialist. Something as ordinary as ongoing cardiac monitoring. Without preparation, the choices are limited. Public clinics are overwhelmed and slow, and private clinics charge what amount to tourist prices for anyone without local coverage. A monthly budget of $2,000 gets wiped out in about 3 weeks once specialist visits and tests start piling up. Eventually, the retiree decides to move back to Canada, but because they had formally severed residency, provincial health coverage does not restart the day they land. Most provinces require a waiting period of around 3 months before coverage kicks back in, which means the exact moment they need care the most is the moment they have the least protection. Now run the same scenario for someone who actually planned for it. This retiree kept what amounts to a secondary residency, spending enough time in Canada each year, generally at least 183 days, to keep a provincial health card active. They pair that with a hybrid insurance policy that covers emergencies abroad, but leans on the Canadian system for anything ongoing or expensive. They also keep a Canadian bank account, a valid provincial ID, and a mailing address active, so paperwork, prescriptions, and pension deposits never get tangled in the transition. This is the anchor that makes it real. A 3-day stay in a top-tier private international hospital commonly runs around $15,000 US dollars out of pocket. The same 3-day stay for a Canadian resident back home costs $0 at the point of care, paid for through the tax system you have already been contributing to for decades. The gap between those two outcomes is not luck. It comes down to a handful of decisions made months before anyone got sick. So how do you actually decide which path fits your own situation? It comes down to 3 specific things you can check before you ever list your house. If you are seriously weighing this decision, run 3 checks before you do anything else. Step 1 is the 20-year rule. Pull your contribution and residency history and count how many years you have actually lived in Canada since turning 18. If you land short of 20 years, leaving the country means your OAS payment can stop within months, not just shrink. Step 2 is the withholding math. Take your current marginal tax rate on RRIF withdrawals and compare it to the flat 25% non-resident withholding rate. For a lot of retirees pulling in under $55,000 a year, their actual rate sits well below 25%, which means leaving the country raises the tax on that specific pool of money instead of lowering it. Step 3 is what I call the test drive. Rent before you buy, and do it during the off-season in your target country. not the 2 perfect weeks every travel brochure shows you. 5 months living like a resident, dealing with real wait times at a clinic and a real hydro or utility bill, tells you more than a dozen glossy YouTube tours ever will. While you are there, price out an actual grocery run, a tank of gas, and a basic doctor's visit in local currency, not the converted number from a travel blog written by someone in their 30s with no health conditions. Those 3 prices alone will tell you more about your real cost of living than any calculator. I recently talked with a couple who saved close to $200,000 in departure tax by doing nothing more complicated than changing the date they officially declared non-residency. Same house, same portfolio, same petition, just a different date on one form. That is the kind of detail that gets missed when someone is moving on excitement instead of a checklist. It is completely normal to feel angry watching 40% or more of your income disappear into a system where you sometimes cannot even find a family doctor. That frustration is not irrational. It is a reasonable reaction to a system that does not always deliver what it promises. That anger is worth acknowledging out loud instead of pretending it away, because pretending is usually where the expensive mistakes start. The problem is letting that anger make a lifestyle decision for you. Moving is a math problem, not a protest vote. If the actual numbers say you would end up lonelier, more exposed to currency risk, and worse off at 75 living somewhere unfamiliar, then staying here and using every legal tool available to lower your tax bill is the real win, even if it feels less dramatic than packing up. None of this means Canada gets a free pass. It means the decision deserves the same discipline you would use for any other 6-figure choice, not a decision made in a moment of frustration after opening a tax bill. If you want the video on how to legally cut what you pay without ever leaving the country, that is coming, so make sure you are subscribed for it. Canada is losing people at the fastest rate in 74 years, and there is a real reason for that. But if you are between 55 and 65, the 2 numbers that actually decide whether a move works for you are the exit toll on the way out and the healthcare gap waiting on the other side. You have options either way. Some people are better off becoming what amounts to a strategic snowbird, keeping residency here while spending real time somewhere cheaper. Others are genuinely better off leaving for good. Neither answer is wrong, as long as the math includes that $10,000 or more in annual insurance premiums and the 25% withholding tax on RRIF withdrawals, not just the price of a plane ticket and a beachfront view. The exodus is real. Whether it is the right move for your specific numbers is a separate question, and it is one worth answering with a calculator instead of a highlight reel. If you want more breakdowns like this one, the kind that actually run the numbers for people close to retirement, subscribe to Brian's Canadian Retirement Playbook.